welcome to the Aggressive Life. Over the month of August, we're going to do a deep dive into each of the 5 marks from man. These marks form the primal code that separates the men from the boys. And today we're going to look at the fact that men work. And we're also going to talk with one of my heroes, one of my all-time heroes. I think our number one podcast most listens to is what?
Most listens to is John Burke.
Oh, okay. The Heaven one.
Yep.
New York Times bestseller.
Matthew McConaughey.
Matthew McConaughey, people like him.
And then literally like 50 listens under it. He's going to pass him soon, is Denny Patton.
Okay. So Denny Patton was a guy who led me to Christ. I am a Christian, and he helped me understand the difference between relationship and religion. And then he also mentored me in ministry, brought me into ministry, which is my day job, which is not the aggressive life, although the aggressive life, I guess, is ministry. Let's not tell anybody about that, though.
Yeah, we'll keep that under wraps.
Let's keep that under wraps. And so I had him on, what was supposed to be our last conversation of his life a couple years ago. And a lot of tears on that, a lot of boo-hooing. And today I'm going to have on the guy who led Denny to Christ, the guy who actually all good things have happened in me have actually come through Reid directly or indirectly, because he set up kind of a culture and a bunch of things that trickled down to be able to get me. In fact, here's a funny story, a very powerful story. I had a phone meeting before I had time with Denny for our podcast, and I put down the phone. I was rushing away, and the phone rang, and it was Reidley. I call him Reidley. Everybody who I like has a dirt name. It was has a nickname. Reidley was on there. I was like, Reid Carpenter never calls me as he should, and he's got a lot of stuff going on. And I, way back when, was just a little peon who was enjoying the important things he did in ministry, being able to gather a paycheck from things that he had started, getting wisdom from people he had built into. And I was like, oh, Reid. I picked up and said, hey, you got a time here to really drill into somebody who's one of the rare ones who understands what it's like to have a vision and give your life to it. This could be the last conversation he has about that. Make it last, make it work. And I did. He gave me great impact. It had that podcast go great. This man has served as the president of Leadership Foundations of America for 5 years. It's a faith-based network driving spiritual and social change in cities. Before that, he was leading the Pittsburg Leadership Foundation that had a vision to make Pittsburgh more famous for Jesus than it was for steel at the time, and also started things like helping student ministry people, which is how I got in that. Before that, he was Young Life and was the odds-on favorite. Word goes, odds-on favorite to become the president of Young Life and succeed the founder, Jim Rayburn. Before that, he was yada, yada, yada. We can get all kind of fun stuff. I should actually talk about Reidley. I should actually have him talk about how he has worked. Welcome to the Aggressive Life, Reid Carpenter.
Thank you. Great to be with all of you. I don't know who all of you are, but I am very grateful to have this chance to chat with you and share whatever wisdom that I have.
Well, man, you got a lot of wisdom. I could have had that intro and just talked about the amazing deposits you made in my life for a long, long time. And you've done that because you really exhibit an unbelievable work ethic. Have you ever thought of that before?
Not in that context. I've obviously thought about calling. I have thought about vision for one's life. I have thought about steadfastness. I've thought about all the ingredients that make a life going in the same direction possible.
So how would you see those things as synonymous with work ethic, or something that builds into work ethic, or just do us a mind dump on those things, Reid, because you've been in the game for a long time.
Brian.
Yeah, yes.
Do me a favor and describe what you mean by work ethic.
Boy, it's really odd that someone actually asked me a question.
I'm so happy right now.
Wow.
I'm so happy.
That's amazing. I can't tell you how often we have guests on and say, hey, Brian wants to have a conversation with you, so we'd love if you asked him some questions. Nobody asked Jack. You, with the work ethic you have, you actually asked a question. And we're only 5 minutes in. I told you Reedley was amazing, Dirt.
You were so right. So right.
Kind of the phrase, and you knew me, you first knew me or knew of me when I was a boy. The phrase is, men work and boys play. I like play. I spend a lot of money and time on playing, but I do that to keep myself fresh for work. It's why I didn't excel in college, is because I didn't have a work ethic to actually go to school and study and take the test. So when I'm talking work ethic, I'm saying this is what I have to do, and I'm going to do it even if I'm not getting immediate satisfaction and even if it's uncomfortable, because I believe this is going to eventually add value. And if I don't do this, then what is the alternative? A man has to work. Whereas a boy really doesn't want to work. A boy does everything he can to get out of work and being productive and contributing to people's lives and having a schedule, whereas a man embraces those things and sees that that's part of how I make a valuable life. So that's how I'm defining work ethic.
Thank you. Thank you. This might not be what you want to hear, but the reason I have a little strange encounter with that term is the fact that I've never worked. And I never have considered myself ever having a job. It hasn't come to me that way. And so the fact is I could use a lot of language now, but I'll just basically say that I was one of the most fortunate people in the world that God revealed to me early in my life what the purpose of my life was. Very, very, very early in my life, I discovered the purpose of my life. And I am now 84 years old. I have not completed yet the purpose of my life because I'm still fritting here. And so I ain't going to finish that until I am alone with Jesus, asking him whether I completed it or not. And so, that's, I know what question you're asking, and I think it's a fair question for 98% of the people in the world. And I think it describes very, very well manhood versus boyhood. But I also know that there are some people who have known from the get-go what they were to be, what they were to do, and what they were to, what burden in life and what joy in life they were to carry.
And what is that for you, Reid? What has that been? What's that purpose?
The purpose for me is that I've had three kind of interventions of the Holy Spirit. The first one was when I was 5 years old, and some lady asked me if I would commit my life to Jesus Christ and accept him as my Lord and Savior. Now, I didn't know what the heck she was talking about, but I did. I did. I remember like it was yesterday, okay? The second was at Frontier Ranch when I came to grips with who Jesus really was, the Jesus I never knew. And when I got to know him, I was off the charts with joy and enthusiasm. And so at that particular point, I didn't want to just follow him. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to know him better than I knew anybody in the world. And I wanted to make him known the way that he basically presented himself. So I began that journey, and that journey then led me to Pittsburg, to Young Life, and then to Pittsburg. And then I met Sam Shoemaker on the mountain, and then the grand vision for my life was presented to me. and that was to make Pittsburgh as famous for God as it was for steel. So I've committed 60 years to that hopeful achievement, knowing that it will never be achieved in my lifetime and here, but the vision was large enough, compelling enough, incredible enough, exciting enough, non-boring enough to keep me on my toes for 60 years.
And you're working at it. You're on your toes, brother. You're working at it.
Right now. Right this second.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, it's interesting when you talk purpose, okay, or this purpose that you have, I hear you using it different than I hear the rest of us use it. Most of us who use that word are in the paralysis of analysis. We're always trying to analyze what is my purpose, and I can't do anything until I have my purpose, and I can't really work hard until I have my purpose. I've known you decades, and while you've had that kind of same North Star of that passion for Christ and Pittsburgh, the number of things you've done for a living or work, your quote-unquote work, when I'm using work, has been different. I mean, one moment it's student ministry, another moment it's managing an organization of people who are dealing with student ministry. You're starting an organization called the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation. You're helping other people do other I mean, that's morphed. So you're not just kind of waiting for on high the message to come before you work, or are you? How does that work?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think we all assimilate these things differently. You know, the privilege of my life, Brian, has been that the Lord has given me vehicles in which to move and have my being. I mean, the fact is, you had no clue what you were doing when you went to Cincinnati, but God gave you a vehicle in which to exercise your gifts. You didn't have that necessarily, in my opinion. You didn't have clarity on that when you went there. You obeyed a calling and went there, but you didn't have tracks to run on. God honed those tracks so that you would have a vehicle that has given you the opportunity to do podcasts. I mean, this just didn't happen. This happened because you got into the right lane in order to exercise the movement of the Spirit in your life. And so that's what happened to me along the way. I mean, I didn't figure this out. God figured it out, but he gave me lanes. He set up lanes for me to run on in. And, yes, they were organizational. Yes. I mean, I raised billions of dollars in my lifetime for things that matter, things that I was called to see and do. But I didn't ever sit down and figure that out. I simply got myself in the path of revelation, knowing that the book of Acts has not ended. It's an ongoing drama that I happen to have a place in.
Oh, dude, now I'm taking notes on you. I'm actually preaching this week on the book of Acts, and you just helped me bring that whole talk together. Book of Acts has not ended. That's good. It's not the book of thoughts either. It's not the book of intentions. It's the book of Acts, people working towards the purpose of God. That's just fantastic. I don't want to pass, folks, this wasn't a typo that you lost in the verbal quality of our podcast. Reid said aliens, billions, not That's really impressive that you could raise that amount of money for the purpose of God, and no one on this podcast probably knows your name, which is exactly the way you want it. You don't want attention to yourself. You want the attention on God and the work that he's calling you and others to.
Amen. There's a lot of ways to look at this, Brian. It's not just that you raise money, But when you take a look at the enterprises that you have been used by God to create, before you came along, they weren't. All they were was in the mind of God. He chose you to carry out what he's already decided to carry out. Okay. Now, when you drop that dime in the water and you watch what happens, I'll just give you one example. I'll never forget it. When the idea of a World Vision distribution center came across my plate. Okay. We did that in order for the Pittsburg Leadership Foundation to have a vehicle that would make money for our future. It was a for-profit corporation that we created. But what we discovered that God had a different mind. And so we helped World Vision create their World Distribution Center. Well, when you drop that, let's say $800,000 into the water, which we invested, then guess what? God comes along, billions of dollars of goods and services for the poor all over the world. So it from the standpoint of entrepreneurship of the kingdom, it's a magnitude of blessing when you are in God's will and you're creating things that matter to Jesus. You will have never any idea how much money you have raised for the kingdom of God because you've been faithful in your ministry. I mean, it's unbelievable, just money-wise. This isn't necessarily just cash. This is impetus. This is a tiger fund.
Yeah. Right. You mentioned a word, or you're at least describing this word if you haven't mentioned it. The word faithful. Just faithful. When I was younger, if you had asked me, do you want to be faithful or do you want to be fruitful? I said, I'll take fruitful all day long. I want to put points up in the board. I want to accomplish things. The older I am, I want to be fruitful. I want to be part of things that are putting points in the board and growing new things under the guidance of God, and lives are changing, and more people whose lives are changing, and more people are helped, more people brought out of poverty. All that's kind of, I want that. But man, I tell you what, I've seen enough people who appear to be very, very fruitful, and they just got squashed at the fruit stand on the side of the road. Their fruit just dried up. They didn't have staying power. I tell you what, I'm up for a good old-fashioned faithfulness these days, and that's what's inspiring for me, Reid. I wasn't sure where I wanted to take our conversation, but I knew having a guy on who's 84 years old can always tell us something about something, because you've been faithful, brother, faithful for decades and decades. Wow. Does that want to add to that? That must not be a new thought to you. You must feel sometimes like you're a lonely person, that there's not a lot of people like you. I feel that increasingly, only being 57 is like the flavor of the month keeps dropping off by the wayside, and people keep dropping out or whatever, or people my own age retiring, and I'm still going, and I'm going, if I'm you, I got to feel really weird. Do you feel weird?
No, because I've been privileged to be around, Brian, a lot of people who have, and I still am, people who have been faithful and are still going. My brother's 86. The guy that led me to Christ is 93. I mean, I'm surrounded by people who really have stayed the course. And so I've had wonderful, wonderful, wonderful role models. And now, the fact of the matter is that unless you have been given unction by the Holy Spirit to stay the course, okay, my marriage was gone. 10 years I was separated from my wife, right? Those were black, dark, unbelievable, challenging years on the basis that my performance, my capacity, my ability was not going to stand up in terms of a life of productive faithfulness. I ran out of gas. So we all look back over our shoulders and see those unbelievable cavernous pits that we know we should have fallen in and never gotten up. But because we've experienced the overwhelming grace of God and he's restored us out of that black hole, and given the nature of our purpose, legs, new legs upon which to run, right?
Yep.
I could talk about events. I've had a tough year this past year. I've had cancer. I have had cervical spine surgery. I've lost a shoulder. I had to have it replaced all in 1 year.
Wow.
And the fact of the matter is that I learned more about Jesus in what I call the cancer ward. You know, I call it the chemo depot. I mean, those places are where Jesus is. I learned more about Jesus in those places than I can even possibly tell you. So I don't know, to your listener, my greatest plea is, how much are you getting to know Jesus? This is what I stare at, every day.
Picture of Jesus.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. Yes.
This is my man. That's been the joy and the delight of my life. And I happen to meet you on that journey of trying to make this man known, and grab a hold of your imagination. Look what he has done with your imagination, Brian.
Yeah.
You are crazy. Because he's taken your imagination and thrust it way beyond most people. And so I have to imagine that it's not because you have some magic dust, but I have to imagine that you're in love with Jesus Christ and that you know him pretty well.
I am. I don't know him as well as I think I do, in large part because I thought I knew him really well 10 years ago. I didn't know him as well 10 years ago as I thought I did because of how I know him now. So yes, yeah, you're right about that. I wonder, I had a whole bunch of questions for you, or some I'll get to, but one of them was like, what you're already answering without me even saying it, was how do you stay fresh? What do you do to last? And you already answered part of that question anyway. You were like, you're having fresh experiences. You're learning new things. You're going into cancer surgery. What do you call it? Chemo depot. You're going into chemo depot going, oh, goody. I might learn something new about Jesus today. Oh, a new learning environment. That's not normal for people. Most people just are in a perpetual pity party about themselves and anything that's difficult, instead of twisting the script in their mind and going, hey, this is a fresh adventure. I might learn something about God, the kingdom, maybe myself as a result of this. Has that been something you've always done in your life, or is this something you've worked hard to acquire?
Brian, one of the great privileges of my life is hanging out with the poor. As you know, I've had a lifetime of being in very difficult situations with the issues, not just the people who are poor, but the issues that are because of poverty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think Jesus has made it very clear that that's where he spends time and where we get to see him in his distressed disguise. And the fact is, I've had the privilege of knowing him in those places, on the Lower East Side of New York. I mean, in racial conflicts and shootings, and I mean, I've had, I've hung out with gangbangers and the Joe Blannies of this world, and watch these guys go down. And so my taste buds, when it comes to looking for Jesus, I've developed some pretty significant taste buds, and because I kind of know what I'm looking for, because I've hung out with Jesus long enough to know where he hangs out and who he hangs out with and how he hangs out. So that's been really one of the great privileges of my life. I mean, I have never, ever, one time since I said yes to Jesus' plan for my life, I've never been bored.
That's good. That's great. Never been bored. That's awesome.
By the way, do you remember Jim Rayburn saying, did you hear this quoted? The greatest sin in the world is to bore a high school kid with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
You can't get a worse sin than that.
Right. Yeah, I've taken that. A lot of people, that's a really critical thing. If you want to understand me, is I get accused all the time of being juvenile and childlike and all that stuff, and I say, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think you drilled that into me of, hey, things should be fun. There should be some excitement. There should be some silliness, some stupidness, all that stuff. And you drilled that quote into me, and I still think that if it's a sin to bore somebody who comes to hear you speak. It's a sin to bore somebody who comes to church for 70 minutes.
Amen.
It's a sin. It's awful. You're being freaking lazy. You're seriously talking about work ethic? You're being lazy and not thinking about a 70-minute experience that could be capturing. You know, the people who think that there's extra stars on your forehead from God when you craft a boring experience, or that you actually somehow get dinged by God when you craft an experience that wows people and keeps their attention, that's thinking is weird. Let me tell you why things don't keep people's attention. Somebody isn't working. Somebody isn't spending time to be creative. Somebody isn't being vulnerable enough to share something about themselves that's uncomfortable. These are the kind of work ethic things I'm talking about. And I think your question there, your statement there, go back to Jim Rayburn, just reminds me of that.
Yeah. You know, I think that also, I don't know what you do in your worship services, because I've never attended one.
I worship God.
But
we worship God. That's what we do. We worship God.
Amen.
We worship God, yes.
Well, that's beautiful. But one of the ways to do that is let lay people tell their stories about what Jesus has done for them last week. We never get to hear fresh stories about what Jesus is doing. And so I think that every service ought to have somebody standing up saying, let me tell you about what Jesus had, that sort of thing. But at any rate, I think that fresh layman's, tough guys, they say, if they have to say bullshit, there's no, go ahead, say it, whatever. But just be real.
Amen. Yes. Big news. Pre-sales for the next two books in the 5 Marks of a Man library are open right now. It's almost like we could say the 5 Marks of a Man trilogy.
Almost.
Yeah, there's like Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then there's
the 5 Marks trilogy.
5 Marks of trilogy. Yeah. Not quite the same writing quality, but close.
Close, very close.
Close.
Very close.
So this includes a repackaged edition of the original, along with updated artwork and a new preface, and an all-new tactical guide designed to be used with a group of like-minded dudes, giving you challenges, prompts, discussion questions to work the marks into your life. Take my word for it, this isn't your grandmother's fill-in-the-blank guide. It's unlike anything you may have experienced before in written form. Pre-order either book, and you'll get access to a limited edition 5 Marks poster. Get all the details and claim your poster over at briantome.com/5mark. That's briantome.com/5marks. Now, back to the show. I was on a text thread with some of your other disciples, if you will. It's an ongoing thread with some of the folks that are far down your downline. Chris McLean, Glenn Campbell, just a bunch of folks like that, right? Ramsey Longacre, Rick Hubler. I mean, a lot of these names you probably don't even know. You know, some of them. There's just a lot. When you live your life faithfully, you got a great work ethic, or you go after your purpose, however you want to define it. Stuff happens. Well, this photo, they didn't know that I was having you on the Aggressive Life, and I don't even know how it came up, but this photo came to me last week. I'm going to show it to you. Reid and I are on Zoom. See if you can see that photo. It's a photo for those. It's a photo of 3 guys: Krista Fazio, an old friend of mine who died a year ago, Reid Carpenter in the middle, and Glenn Campbell in there as well. All covered in mud, entirely head to toe covered mud. We used to do these weekends where we take kids away and try to share the gospel with them, and we have to do stupid things just to keep them engaged. And whenever there was a rainstorm, we would make a rainstorm. We would go get every hose we could, just find dirt and wet it down, and we'd have a massive mud fight. And here's this picture of Reid, and I figured you're about here. You're older than I am right now, or at least the age that I am right now. Here's 57-year-old Reidley. He's covered to head to toe in mud all over your face. And I'm going, gosh, if I'm showing up to a youth event and there's a mud fight, I think I'm going to laugh. I think I'm going to endorse it. I think I'm going to tell people to do it. I think I'm going to run interference if someone says, we shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. I'll be all in on that, but I'm going, I don't know if I'm getting in the mud puddle. I don't know. I'm really challenged by that. That's an aggressive move that you made. Like, I don't know if you remember that or not, but it's just the heart of, you called it unction. I'm not sure what unction means, but I like it. That heart of unction, of aggressiveness, getting involved, jumping in, diving in. Give us, if you remember anything about that day or anything about anything, give us a little mini sermon on it.
Well, we had 400 kids at Laurelville that weekend.
You actually remember. Wow.
Oh, my gosh. It's called Brian, it's called the Holy Mud Weekend. More kids met Christ that weekend than any other weekend that we ever had at Laurelville. Okay?
Yep.
And the fact is that mud event was not planned. It poured down rain, and the kids went out and did what kids do. And then we all jumped in because we thought that was the funniest, the most hilarious. I mean, if you saw Krista Fazio and Glenn Campbell, I mean, it was just...
We were all covered in it. All of us were covered in it, but I was 20, so go ahead, keep going.
At Laurelville, right now, there is a mud pit. Every single Laurelville, everybody gets into the mud. And obviously, we have found that is very, very, very wonderful for the gospel, for people to get totally and completely muddy and then get washed off. It is a phenomenal picture of what happens when we bathe ourselves in the Spirit.
Wow. Hold on. Let me make sure I'm understanding this. I was there. I remember this happened. I was a part of it. You're saying since then, this has become institutionalized, where it's now almost a rite of passage.
Exactly.
Wow. That's awesome. Jeez. That's really cool.
It's so deeply theological, really. I mean, at what point do kids today not only have fun, but need to get dirty to let themselves go so that they can see clearly who and what they are? And when you emerge out of a mud pit and fall into the arms of people that you love who are also muddy, it's one of the great, great, great ways that what we call counselors, but friends of kids, can relate to them. Mud to mud.
Man, now you got my creative juices going. We have, a big camp thing that we do: man camp, woman camp, vet camp, father-son camp, mother-daughter camp, band member Chihuahua camp. I mean, just all kind of camps. It's one of those unique things we do, or I'm doing. I'm at this stage of my life, Reid. I'm no longer on the path of make Crossroads bigger. I want Crossroads to get bigger, but my best creativity isn't going towards organizational dynamics. My best creativity, I want to go to new wineskin things that could reach a new generation or a new type of person that no other organization or church has a shot with. And camps is one of them for us. I'm doubling down and putting massive money into it. We have people from all over the country that are coming to these rough experiences, pitching tents. It's been pretty cool. And this is a fascinating one. I've never thought, we have baptisms at the end. I've never thought about having actually a mud pit where you could have fun. I mean, grown men doing this, or even intentionally get muddy before you get baptized. That's interesting.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, right. It's a physical representation for who you are. Fascinating. Wow. All right. Yeah, you're ringing my bell right now, man. This is strong. So I'd like you to maybe react to this. You're older, faithful. I found a statistic, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear what your take on this is. Well, there's a study that I ran across that said that 56% of the workforce is likely to look for a new job in the next 12 months. 56% of everybody who has a job is going to try to find a new job in the next 12 months. In 2022, that number was 51%. So that we just keeps climbing, that we're less apt to stay in our job and keep trying to find another job. Do you have any opinion as to why that is? What's going on with us or our economy?
Well, I think that we're living in incredibly, incredibly difficult times, Brian. I don't know whether this is an unraveling that is going on everywhere. I feel it. Most people feel it. They don't know quite how to describe it, but nonetheless, it's happening, kind of a downward spiral culturally and so forth. And I think that is very pervasive in the workplace. I don't want to pontificate about things I don't really know about, but I do believe that we're living in these times where forces everybody thinking that that job that they do have right now is not going to last. That's the mindset that I think we're in. So there is this business of looking to find out if there's a better one out there, especially because so many industries need people right now.
Yeah, it's a good word, unraveling. And we've been saying that for a long, long time, but it just seems like there's just more and more evidence of the unraveling. And the signs are, the runaway growth of mental illness, the runaway growth of suicide, the runaway increase in mass shootings, the runaway decrease in the number of people who want to get married, there's so many indicators are just not good, and they're getting worse, and it comes down to this lack of connective tissue, I think, that we have as a culture.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, if I may. When it comes to this unraveling, when it comes to what happens to be on the other side of that unraveling, whether or not I can remember being on top of Mount Washington when Sam gave that vision for Pittsburgh. I'll never forget this because it's at the heart of my belief. Okay.
Yep.
When he said to Don James and me, boys, and we were, behold your city. Behold your, turn around. You're up on Mount Washington. Don't look at me. Look at your city. Now tell me what you see. What do you see when you see your city? Well, I tell you, Brian, what I saw two things. I heard the words that, behold, a new Jerusalem. I saw a new Jerusalem coming down from heaven. It's not something we're building from the earth up. It's something that has been established, and it's coming down from heaven. So our job is to call it down, pray it down, work it down, because it already exists. Not something we have to make up. And the other thing I saw, which was very fascinating to me, I'm sitting there looking at the third largest corporate town in America. So there is Westinghouse, and there is U.S. Steel, and there's Gulf Oil, and there's Pittsburgh Pirates, and they're across the skyline. And what I saw was that Jesus already had a plan to infiltrate the workplace. It's called the church.
His people.
It's called the people of God. They're already there.
Right.
They're already there. But they've never basically identified themselves as being emissaries of Jesus and his kingdom in that place.
Yes.
They haven't been trained to be that, and so they just go and occupy space and get a paycheck. So I think that we've got the strategy, we've got the capacity, because at Procter & Gamble today, while we're on this call, there are Christians from your church in Procter & Gamble serving Jesus today, right now.
Right.
So the mobilization of what is already there is pretty, it's very, very profound and very provocative. I'm just wondering what emphasis in your ministry on this whole work thing are you putting on that strategy of God?
Well, I think the main thing I'm trying to do whenever I see folks is help them to see that you don't graduate from the workplace, the corporation, your private business. You don't graduate from there to a religious nonprofit. You don't try to work your way up the kingdom ladder, and maybe someday you'll be quote unquote in ministry, which is defined as getting a paycheck from some religious organization. You're where you are right now to do the work of God where you are right now, whether it's a bricklayer or a marketer. You're where you are right now, and we need to represent Jesus and have a great work ethic for him while we do our jobs. I was just the other day, this is so good. I think I'm going to mention this weekend when I preach is Lib and I just got a new washer and dryer. And I paid the extra to have it delivered. So the guys come up and they deliver it. And, they're leaving. They leave. And of course, the washing machine doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work. It's a brand new one. It doesn't work. So then I'm on the phone and figuring out who I got to talk to. And the phone message says, you can text us at this message here, get better, faster service. So now I'm texting a specific number. And finally I get past the bot and an actual person comes on and this person's trying to solve my problem. And they got as far as they could. And I think they did solve it. I guess got to get a whole new one basically. But anyway, the end of it, this person goes, well, let me just read it because I took a picture of it because I was so inspired, actually. Here it says, he says, after you get the new one, he says this, quote, "We would love to hear how it went. I pray you have a blessed rest of your week." And I thought, well, here's a person from Home Depot who didn't get the corporate political correctness memo. You're actually bringing like godly language in. I assume you're a Christian. Even if you're not, you're just trying to bless somebody. I pray you're letting a customer who I have not expressed my faith, you're letting me know that you actually believe in prayer. You're talking about a blessed week, not that you have a lucky week, that if things go well, that God actually has his hand in your life. And I just thought, okay, this is a person, even as they're texting somebody they don't know through a helpline, they're trying to put their faith in action. That's pretty cool.
That's good. That's great.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I like it. So I don't think I've figured it out yet, Reid, but I know that we've got to not help people think that their next job is the one they can really serve Christ in. The current job right now is where God has them and where he wants them to serve. And it starts with giving an honest day wage. And if you're working from home, or as Elon Musk has said, if you're not working from home, if you're choosing to not work from home, if you're working at home, man, we just got to have great work ethics and putting our time in on the computer at home instead of at the cubicle.
Amen.
So I want to just end our time. This has nothing to do with work. Well, it could, but I'd be really remiss if I didn't learn from a spiritual hero here how to be 84 and last. You know, you're 27 years beyond me. You still have vision and dreams and energy. What do I do as a 57-year-old, or what does the 27-year-old do to last, to be faithful, to maintain that unction, to be a hard worker? What have you done to last and to keep going? Because I compare you to other people I know your age in my own family, and it's like night and day. It's just not the same. So what have you done, or what should I do?
One is that within the last 20 years, I became a Catholic. And in that regard, one of the things that has been most precious to me is the Eucharist and the sacraments, because they do not depend on human achievement. They do not depend on the ability of the communicator. It's mystery and it's substantive. I'm speaking very personally now. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. But this is one of the ways that I was at Mass this morning, and I received a fresh dose of Jesus. And it tingles my life, it charges my battery, and it brings me great joy. Okay, so that's one answer. Each one of us are responsible for finding that manna on a daily basis that we can scrape either off the ground or off somebody else's ground or somewhere that we can feed on and be nurtured by.
That's great.
The second,
let me stop right there. Let me stop right there. That's so deep. Let me make sure I hear it. So you're not necessarily giving an advertisement for the Eucharist and becoming a Catholic. What you're mainly saying is that for you is a way you found to stay fresh, and all of us have got to find a way to stay fresh daily. I love that. Scrape the dew off the ground. Scrape the manna. Awesome. Right?
And make sure that whatever it is that you discover is not dependent on your effort.
There you go.
That's where we get all bagged up. We don't know how to live by grace. Boy, if there's anything I found out during this cancer, I had thousands of people praying, and I basically referred to it as an experience. It was an avalanche of grace. Avalanche of grace.
Yeah.
Okay? We've got to find places where grace is pregnant. Grace is not a noun. Grace is a verb. And it basically affects our whole life. And I think one other little thing is that, you know, you've had, and the reason we love each other and we tune into one another is the fact that we're part of each other. We got the same DNA, okay? And the fact of the matter is that you, myself, one of the greatest gifts we've been given is each other. I love to hear from you. I love to hear from you. I love to laugh. I love to tell stories. I love to hear what God is doing in you, through you, with you, and your beautiful wife. The fact of the matter is that we've got each other, and that's about as good as it gets. There's no greater reality than friendship and relationships in the matter of journeying together through this this mess we're in. So I've had, when people ask me, do you want more friends? I say, please no. I don't need any more friends. I got more friends now than I've ever had in my life, and they mean more to me than they ever have. And so I would just basically salute the most simple and the basic realities in terms of your congregation, the men you're talking to. Make sure that they are harnessed to some people who really, really love them, know them, support them, and can go into battle with them.
This is really refreshing for me, Reid. I've been going down the rabbit hole of some of these MDs and gurus about how to live longer and what the key is to having your last decade be fruitful. And there's a lot of good stuff, and it's really, really good.
Yeah.
And reading those books or listening to those podcasts, and been incorporating a lot of stuff. But I'll tell you what, one of the things that finally just starts to wear on me, it's like religion. It's like another form of worn out religion. Now, this is what you have to do. You have to be in the top 10% VO2 max, and this is what you do. You have to have this much. You have to be able to hang from a chin-up bar for 2 minutes and have grip strength, and this is what you have to do. You have to build up to be able to carry your entire body weight in each hand, or half your body weight in each hand and this is what you do. You have to make sure your sleep is this, and you have to, and it's all these rules, all these regulations, and I start going, oh my gosh, this is like a 15 all over again. Of like, now I got a new religion. All these things I got to do in order to be approved of, in order to have a long life. And I believe in a lot of these things. I'm doing a lot of these things. But you're not talking of those things. You're talking about my spiritual, mental, emotional health. You're talking about getting outside of the living longer cult. You're talking about getting an encounter with God and having Him give to you what you can't manufacture on your own. And that's how you're lasting. Is that right?
Well, I would say yes. But I would also say that when you're in this spot of following God's will and looking over your shoulder and seeing the faithfulness of God, this is, I don't know how much more time we have, but one of the things I wanted to share with you before we end is I think one of the new revelations to me over this last really 2 months, as I have, wandered in this place of, so much physical ailment, so much challenge. It's like my body is deteriorating, but my spirit is soaring. I can hardly contain the unction that I feel in my spirit, okay? Because I'm on my way home. I'm going home. There's a place prepared for me. And I'm going to go home. But I'm not going to go till He's finished with whatever He has for me to do. So this business about trying to stay alive longer, I mean, for the follower of Jesus, that's almost sort of bullshit, I mean, I don't want to stay alive any longer than he wants me alive. Okay?
Yeah, you're right. It is the folks who are really into this and put this stuff out there, which I'm really thankful for. To a person, they're atheist or agnostic. To a person, as far as I could tell, because they have nothing else to live for. Because for them, this life is all there is. So if this life is all there is, it's all about me, and I got to have me last longer instead of maybe you need to take an aggressive move and start doing some things that are more risky that might cause you to die sooner. Maybe you need to start enjoying your life and having a couple cigarettes and enjoying your life because you're going to have a better one the next time. Maybe you ought to do that. I finally made you laugh.
There's nobody can utter a statement like you just made any better than Brian Toll. Because he's probably smoking a couple of cigarettes behind the barn door.
No, on my front deck, actually, on my front porch is where it happens. I gotta tell you, just be with you. I'll close out with this. Lib and I have talked before. One of our biggest mistakes in life, or Lib's greatest regret. I wish she was here. I should have told her you were coming on because I'd have had her on. Is do you remember when Lib and I?
Been great.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, I'm talking to you now. I'm thinking, talk about connection. Lib and I need to come down to Florida, hang out with you and Carol. You know, for at least for dinner or something like that. I'm serious. I would come down there just for that because we need to rectify something from years ago. I was brand new married. I went out golfing the first time after I was married with Eric Taylor. We talk about this, Brad Henderson, good friends of mine. And Lib calls me on the golf course. She calls me on the golf course and she says, "Where are you?" And I said, I'm golfing. I mean, golfing, you're walking 18 holes back then. You're probably 5 hours on a weekend waiting for people. So I'm golfing. She said, "Still golfing?" Their dad is, never golfed. She didn't know. I said, "Yes." So I end up like running the last holes to get home to my bride who's made this beautiful dinner. And then you call. You called, said, "Hey, Carol and I are the North Hills and just thought maybe you guys want to have dinner," which was shocking. I was a nobody then, and why was Reid thinking of me? And I called Lib. I said, "Hey, you never get Reid Carpenter called him and Carol. They want to go out for dinner." Of course, she had this dinner was made, and because I had not told her what was going to happen with golf, she was just on edge. She's like, "Oh, I can't do that." And she was like, "No," and I was okay. Well, I won't push it. You're right. You worked hard to do dinner, and I think I said, "Honey, these don't come around very often. These don't come around very often." And we talk regularly. That opportunity never came around again. And she talks, "But man, I wish I would have understood that. I would have said, who cares about the meal and stuff like that." I just say that to say, when you have an opportunity to connect with somebody personally, relationally, on a friend level, it doesn't matter what's on your agenda. It doesn't matter how much you've done for something else or how much you prepare for something else. Take advantage of that ability to connect. And that's why, Reid, I think one of the reasons why you've lasted so long is everybody meets you and they feel like they're your best friend. Gil Hopkins, who died years ago, who was another spiritual grandfather of mine, who was here in Pittsburgh, and you and Gil used to do a lot of stuff together back in Young Life days. He would marvel all the time. He said, "Man, Reid meets somebody one time and he remembers their name. And he might see them at a Young Life Ranch event 2 years later and he remembers their name." You have this ability to make everybody feel like they're the most important person in the world because when you're with us, you're really with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wish I could do it. I wish I could be like you in that area. Like, remember those names. I don't know how you're doing it. I want to be like you in many ways. That's one of the ways I want to be more like you. So, Reid, is there anything you want to end with anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about? This is also time to advertise anything you want to advertise, give and ask for anything. Just, I've kind of dictated the pace of conversation. So anything you want to touch on before we sign out?
The real calling, Brian, of my life is really wrapped up in John 17. John 17, I think, is the most under preached about, under practiced reality, because it causes us to ponder. Jesus prayed for you in that prayer. He prayed for me in that prayer. And the fact of the matter is that prayer was the longest prayer ever recorded in the scriptures. And it's not redundant. It's alive and well. So I pray for you and your church. I pray for Cincinnati. I pray for the body of Christ in Cincinnati. I know the thing that I would like you to think about is the fact that God has raised you up and your congregation and your wife and your family as a demonstration of what the kingdom of God is supposed to act like, look like, smell like, be like. And I get a chance down here in Florida to hear all kinds of people from Cincinnati give witness to what is going on in your community, okay? They don't care whether you're Catholic or whether you're this or whether you're that or whether you're this or that. They just recognize the fact that this is a place where the kingdom of God is relevant and reaching out. But I think its ultimate purpose is to connect the body of Christ for the sake of Jesus and his cause, and for the sake of Cincinnati and its potential to become the city that God created it to be. So I'm very bullish about the church. I'm very bullish about the fact that this is the last hurrah for the church. We definitely, in my opinion, are in those last days where we as the church have really got to take seriously what we look like, what we taste like, what we think like, and so forth. So I just want to thank you and your people, whoever's listening to this, to just be a little bit of a cheerleading corner, that there's a world out there that is being fed manna from the results of your work and effort. So thank you.
Well, I don't know if I should say you're welcome to that. I'll just say thank you for making all it possible, because if you're not faithful, doing what God had asked you to do way back when in Pittsburgh, actually before I was born, there's not an infrastructure to me to come into that enables me to come to faith, and there's not somebody who I can look to that gives me a model for leadership that's outside of the book and is inspiring. So I love you, man. I respect you. I respect you to death. You're amazing. You're fantastic. So hey, let's wrap it up. Hey, everybody, it's called The Aggressive Life. I don't know what you gotten out of this. I don't know what you got. Did you get a key to how to keep your faith fresh if you have faith? Did you get an idea of how to increase your work ethic? You know what this is called The Aggressive Life, not the Interesting Thoughts Life, because we want to actually work on the things that we've learned. That's what men do. Men work. They put into practice what they've learned. So I know you've learned something today. Why don't you work at it hard, and we'll see you next time on The Aggressive Life. Thanks for joining us on this journey toward aggressive living. Find more resources, articles, past episodes, and live events over at briantome.com. Pre-orders for my new books, repackaged edition of the 5 Marks of a Man, and a brand new 5 Marks of a Man tactical guide are open right now on Amazon. If you haven't yet, leave this podcast a rating and review. It really helps get the show in front of new listeners. And if you want to connect, find me on Instagram at Brian Tome. The Aggressive Life is a production of Crossroads Church, Cincinnati, Ohio.